So, as you know, we covered I think the war that sort of shocked everyone because not only was it over very quickly between Azerbaijan and Armenia, but shocked a lot of people for the fact that, as we've said, Armenia had security guarantees from Russia, and Russia did nothing to stop Azerbaijan. Absolutely nothing. It even killed Russian peacekeeping troops, and Russia's response was nothing. And as I said, every time we cover this, if this had been American peacekeeping troops, or even there from something like the UN, and American troops had sort of been killed, there would have been a big response from America. Like there would have been planes in the sky overhead, um, firing and taking out Azerbaijan positions and bases. There would have absolutely been a response. But because Russia did not come to Armenia's aid, it's sort of thrown into question now a lot of other security agreements, and you've seen this, other countries now looking not only to the West but China and elsewhere to try and get security guarantees just in case something should happen to them because Russia is busy falling on its sword in Ukraine, and everything is currently focused on there. It seems to have no other military capacity to be able to sort of fulfill out these, separate security agreements, which it's sort of signed, which, kind of important. But one of the things that we did and have said followed through on this is that we do need to look at what is the peace agreement going to be like? And will this bring about a lasting peace? I hope it does. Obviously, there are still huge problems, of course, with what Azerbaijan did. I'm not saying what they did was good, but to try and bring about this sort of peace agreement, and what worries me is that this has been done in Russia through sort of in St. Petersburg. It raises a lot of questions of what's to stop Azerbaijan waiting for, once again, the perfect opportunity to go and, to we say, close the gap. Because if you look at a map, there's this bit of sort of Azerbaijan, and then there's this sort of strip of Armenia, and then you go into sort of Azerbaijan. There were talks at that time from the very sort of pro-war side saying that they should go and take that as well. Those calls have not necessarily stopped, but they feel at the moment taking the Karo-Karabakh region. They do feel that they've got enough on their hands that they need to sort of lock that down first, get that under control, and then maybe they can move on to that. And that's the worrying part that I think. So, will this turn out to be a lasting peace agreement? I hope so. Part of me does also say probably not, um, which again is the worrying part. So we're going to go and have a look at what's been said and what about this peace agreement. Will this be a lasting peace agreement? Again, I hope so, but a big part of me thinks potentially not. But we'll see how this sort of folds out. But before we get more into that, please do remember to have a look at the sort of links down below. There's the Patreon page. There's a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There's the Pony Club, and of course, there's a YouTube thank you button. And of course, if you are part of the Patreon or the Pony Club, we have done the big review of the year where I talk for like an hour and a half on all the some of the events that have gone on throughout this year. So, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all the people who do support the channel. Even if you do, just click the like and share button. Like I say, it all helps. So let's have a look at what's been going on here. This was The Guardian covering this. The title of Azerbaijan Close to Peace Agreement with Armenia, officials say. So Azerbaijan officials said the country could be closing in on a peace agreement with Armenia to end their decades-long conflict following its lightning offensive in September to take control of the Nagorno-Karabakh region. In face of the decisive military advance, more than over 100,000 people have fled the mountainous South Caucasus air enclave. which, following the war in the 1990s, had been under control of the ethnic Armenian forces backed by Armenia. The show of force left the region largely deserted. Uh, and bear in mind why that was ultimately the case. When Azerbaijan took this over, they basically said, hey, look, you've got a year. We're giving you a year. You can leave, you can sell your property. We're not going to stop you, but we're not going to encourage you to leave either, for, diplomatic UN reasons. But if you decide to stay, then you've got to integrate into Azerbaijan. Meaning you've got to completely change your language, change everything over to us. We're giving you a year to be able to do that. And of course, as you can see, 100,000 people fled because they were worried about what would potentially happen after. They don't feel really safe being in that region as well. I do suspect we might hear some stories, certainly in the future, about what is going on in that now controlled territory. We'll wait and see what happens, but if there is a sort of a peace agreement to sort of try and end this decade-long conflict, then obviously that will be good for sort of the future of the region, making it sort of more peaceful. But I still worry about sort of the ethnic conflicts that could arise from this. But the only hope is that this does actually bring a somewhat lasting peace. And of course, Azerbaijan doesn't get more, shall we say, ideas to take more Armenian territory, as we said at the beginning. So, Nikolo Pashin alleged that the advance was an act of ethnic cleansing, which Azerbaijan denied. It was followed by the two countries speeding up its talks on a peace agreement to try and stabilize relations and recognize one another's borders. Remember, Russia had peace agreements with Armenia. And when Armenia realized that Russia wasn't going to come in and step in, it had no choice but to agree to, Azerbaijan. Its military was not in any fit state at all to counter anything from Azerbaijan. Its economy compared to Azerbaijan has been considerably lacking in that regards. So it had no choice but to give up this territory. And as we said, if there is going to be sort of a peace agreement, this should also, I think, recognize certainly Armenia, and hopefully for the future that they don't get any ideas if maybe Azerbaijan gets destabilized, that they don't go and try and retake that region, once again, refueling up this conflict again. And that's why I keep on saying we need to ensure that hopefully this is a lasting peace. So, in a rare sign of goodwill, the two sides have swapped prisoners of war on the 13th of December and have issued a joint statement, one of the first not to be mediated by a third party. Because, as we said, Russia's a bit busy at the moment. The Azerbaijan president, Iman Aliyev, met Pashinyan on the 26th of December for bilateral talks in St. Petersburg, the first such encounter between the two leaders since the mass exodus. Little has emerged, of course, from the meeting so far. The two sides have now exchanged several drafts of a potentially relatively short peace agreement. Ichin Albravo, the special ambassador to the Azerbaijan president, said that the country is now waiting for Armenia's response to its comments of the latest draft proposals, saying, "What is important to understand in this critical stage in the negotiations is we're apparently not that much far away from a final agreement. Is that we do not need a results-orientated exercise," he said. "I know that after 3 decades of negotiations and without no major result, there is a certain kind of fatigue and also a frustration in both parties for how long we will continue to just see and meet each other without any reasonable results." And I take that, and I think a lot of people have taken that, basically saying, look, if you don't agree, maybe there might be more military consequences. And as we've said before, Armenia is in no fit state to really be able to resist Azerbaijan. That is why they were so reliant on the Russian security guarantees. And like I say, at this moment, as Russia has shown time and time again throughout this, it doesn't have the capacity to be able to go out and help its own allies. So they're in a rock and a hard place, and basically will have to try and get the best peace they possibly can for themselves as well. Anyway, Nagorno-Karabakh has obviously been internationally recognized as Azerbaijan territory, but efforts to try and end the conflict have been complicated by Turkey, Russia, Iran, the US, and the EU, all jousting for diplomatic influence in a strategically critical area. Russia has significant military presence in Armenia, and its areas is of geostrategic importance to proposed Middle Corridor, the transport corridor that would link China to Europe through Central Asia and the Caspian Sea and the South Caucasus. So again, as you can see, very, very important. But the alliances have shifted. All these other countries in that area used to look to Russia for protection. But by allowing this to happen, and by not even responding to these security threats or anything like that, a lot of these other countries have now started to look to the US, to the EU for security guarantees. So Abrahamov said the first 5 principles in this draft agreement are, quote, mutually respect for others' territorial integrity, sovereignty, and individually in the inavailability of the international recognized borders, rejection of any territorial crimes to each other, and now in the future, a rejection of any acts that would run counter to the UN Charter, like the use of force or the threat of use of force, but also a demilitarization one of the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which has never been done. But, and the last one, the opening of the communication routes and ties between Armenia and Azerbaijan, because we've been without any connection because of the conflict for over 30 years. So again, in practice, not opposed to a lot of these initial ideas. And the hope is that this can, really lead to, somewhat of a lasting peace. The worry is, of course, it becomes that Armenia does feel that they were sort of forced into this, and what that might mean for the future. But we'll see. So, in practice, the issue of border demilitarization might be settled at a later stage, since negotiations are deemed to be so complex. Azerbaijan wants some kind of dispute mechanism for this agreement, saying that our preference would be to have peace agreements, an article which would speak about some kind of bilateral commission, which needs to be set up in order to address all these misunderstandings or differences in interpretations between us. The UN would be a perfect example, but then again, this is where I think it's trying to find sort of a third party to sort of, shall we say, more cement its claims. And of course, you might be understanding, well, this has all been done in Russia. Why aren't they asking Russia? That's a very good question, probably because it knows Russia is, shall we say, tied up a bit at the moment. So it's taking full advantage of this. So one of the unresolved issues is the link between the main part of Azerbaijan and its enclave in Nakhchivan, which again, as we talked about at the beginning. Part of the ceasefire agreement, signed in November of 2020 following a previous flare-up between the two countries, partially agreed to open the land transportation link through Armenia and the territory, possibly along the old Soviet rail track between the main part of Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan. The link between Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan, between both parts of Azerbaijan, is crucial for us in terms of national security, but also in terms of ensuring an alternative route for the Middle Corridor, Arbo said. We cannot waste any more time. After 3 years, Armenia has not started a feasibility study for the 42-kilometer leg. Of course, we cannot force Armenia to implement what they had committed to. And it is nonsensical to suggest that we would invade to impose this corridor through force or such like. So we have to reach out to Iran as a plan B to try and link by road or rail through Iran. Another reason, as we've said, I think we've mentioned this before, Iran doesn't like Azerbaijan because Azerbaijan has claimed, some of northern Iran territory. So it's not like they're the best of friends either. But one of the things, of course, is worrying. Well, he said, "Oh, we would never force Armenia to do these things. We would never invade." To well, that's exactly what they did in just recently for the Karabakh region. Which again, as I've said, is sort of the worrying thing that will this be a permanent peace, or is this just a a temporary peace for maybe the next 10 years until they feel that they can, go and take that territory for themselves, or do you know, a military sort of push to secure that corridor and then do it themselves. Um, so he said, of course, that the possible existence of an alternative route might make Armenia realize how much they will lose by continuing to resist the link going through its land. Much yet could obviously go wrong. On the 26th of September, the leader of Armenia and the separatists in the Karabakh region rescinded its own previous decree ordering the devolution of the separatist institutions on the 1st of January, and marking the end of 3 decades of separatist rule. The displaced, of course, ethnic Armenian separatists have now spoken of forming a government in exile. And Azerbaijan is insisting that if an ethnic Armenians are displaced back in September, also have a right to return to those Azerbaijans. Of course, previously evicted from their homes in the Karabakh regions should have their rights also recognized. In addition, and this is quite the funny part. In addition, Russia is the previous guarantor, and is trying to regain its influence, which waned when it did not intervene to help Armenia on the day of the decisive 19th of September assault. It had done so in previous military assaults by the Turkish-backed Azerbaijan. Russia regards Prigozhin as far too European, and particularly far too pro-European, and particularly after he refused to participate in some of the recent meetings of the Russian-led regional bodies. But Russia has not abandoned its role. And it was significant that the two leaders met on Russian soil, given the large number of conflicts, given the large number of countries trying to offer themselves as mediators. Yeah. Will this be a lasting peace? I hope so. I genuinely do hope so, because there's still a lot of stuff that could really go wrong. With the fact that you've now got a government in exile after they had said, no, we're going to sort of disband. Them coming back and saying, now we're going to have a government in exile, that could raise a lot of problems. That could especially raise a lot of problems if, like as we said, Armenia sort of want to cause, as we said, more trouble, and potentially look at maybe retaking, of course, this area. There are a lot of problems that could certainly arise from this. This is by no means, I think, a trouble spot that is over. I think there's going to be a lot of trouble. Hopefully, of course, this doesn't flare up into civil wars and other things that could potentially come from that. But for now, does look like there is at least going to be peace in this region. And as we said, if this region is going to become a vital corridor for, an EU sort of China corridor, sort of a rebuilding of the Silk Road in many ways, maybe this will benefit Armenia economically. And if you've got Azerbaijan that is sort of becoming sort of more pro-European, obviously that's going to upset Putin. Upsetting Putin is never really a bad thing. But we'll have to see what happens in this region. But by no means do I think is this conflict over. Maybe it will flare up, but for the time being, it does look like there's at least going to be peace on the table, and that will be good for the region. Absolutely. And of course, there will be, of course, problems. Like I said, by no means is this over or even dealt with. But at least for the time being, there's going to be peace. And time will obviously tell whether this becomes a permanent peace or it becomes a temporary peace for like maybe the next 10 years. Like I say, time will tell. But I do hope that this does become a lot more permanent peace. Like I say, still a lot more issues that could obviously flare up from this region. that will be down to the diplomats. And hopefully this time, at least, maybe Russia might step in. That's, of course, if it's not still busy falling on its sword in Ukraine. Well, again, I very much doubt that's going to sort of continue to happen for quite some time for the moment. But of course, until then, we will see what happens in this region. But for the time being, peace. Hey, it's good. This is the type of thing we've been saying that other lefties should need to sort of pay attention to. How do you get peace? How do you ensure lasting peace? How do you sort of make sure that both sides are happy with the peace agreement? Like I say, we'll see what happens, but for the time being, that's good for the moment. And sometimes that's the best you can ask for. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.